Hello and welcome to the Overly Animated Podcast, where we take animation seriously. We provide fan-oriented and analytic discussion on a variety of animated shows, movies, and anime, currently featuring Steven Universe, Star vs. the Forces of Evil, and Samurai Jack. I'm Justin Cummings, and today I'm joined by John McKenna.
Pleasure to be here.
And Hayley Nabuurs.
Hi there.
Today, John, Hayley, and I are doing a top 5, one of many top 5s we'll be doing over the next number of weeks. Today we are doing top 5 villains. Each one of us has brought our own list of what we consider our top 5 villains in animation. I don't know either of these guys' lists. We will find out who has what overlap there is. It's going to be a fun time. This should be a good, just laid back discussion. Chime in below on what your favorite villains are, and you can find this podcast and all of our podcasts at overlyanimated.com or by searching Overly Animated on iTunes or your favorite podcatcher. So let's dive right into it. There were no rules for this. I kind of threw Hayley and John to the sharks. I said, no rules, just bring 5 villains, and that's all I care about. I didn't give them any parameters on movie or television or anime or anything like that. My personal rule, I kept out Avatar and Korra just because it would have been my entire top 5. So I'm hoping one of these two had something, and if you want Avatar and Korra villains, we have about 6 years of backlog of From the Spirit World from the rest of the crew, so I think we've adequately covered it. So I wanted to kind of spotlight some lesser-known villains. So let's dive right in. John, hit us with your number 5 villain.
Thanks, Justin. So basically, I kind of had my list is villains from the 21st century, and I have my own personal preferences of what I look for in a villain. So that's going to come out. I'll just explain what makes them each a villain. So that's just a preface. So number 5 from Steven Universe, I put Jasper.
Ooh.
And the reason is because, and this is sort of a kind of wishful thinking, because I think Jasper is the kind of character this show really needs, is a recurring villain that does not get converted. And Jasper fits that to a T. Again, when we first saw her, she was nearly unbeatable. She cut through the crystal gems really rapidly. Again, this great, strong character, very pugilistic. But also, as we learn, we realize that she's driven by this singular motive to get back at Rose Quartz, help conquer Earth. And we see this drive because she came from this kindergarten that was deformed, wrong, just came out wrong. Everything, she was the only perfect creature. So you see that motivation, getting away from her past, constantly trying to prove herself to her diamond, to her homeworld, this singular focus. And when you combine it with just this awesome strength that she has, remember, she has not been beaten by any singular gem. She's only been beaten by fusions.
Mm-hmm.
It makes her this great, intimidating character that's just a lot of fun. She eventually destroys herself because she gets corrupted, and we don't know what's coming next, but for that whole time that she was that main recurring villain, great voice acting, great design, and really made the show had that really great clash and those really great fight scenes. Can't wait to see what they do with her. Jasper, number 5.
All right. So, Hayley, you're a Steven Universe fan too. What do you think about Jasper?
I totally agree. I think because it's interesting in Steven Universe where you're right, there isn't really like the big threat. There's kind of that in the vague sense of Homeworld, but beyond that, there isn't really. There are now that they're starting to get like Yellow Diamond and Blue Diamond and everything, but it's interesting because it's not really a show that's centered around an antagonist. It's kind of like off in the background. So I agree with you, John. It was really refreshing to have someone like Jasper come in where you can kind of pin all those TV watching tropes of wanting an antagonist on someone and have them be really interesting and everything. And I'm also pretty excited to see if and when she comes back and see if they can fix her and kind of the resolution to her character. So I agree.
Yeah, I've always been a fan of Jasper. You guys know this. I've done multiple podcasts talking about Jasper, and I want more, but even if we don't get more, I think Jasper was one of the most interesting kind of character arcs we've seen on Steven Universe.
Definitely.
So, Hayley, what is your number 5 villain?
So, don't worry about not covering Avatar and Korra, because I took care of it at Justin, so it's all good.
Thank you.
My number 5 is Kuvira from book 4 of Korra. And I really liked her because something that I appreciate in a villain, and you'll see it reflected in my list, is that they themselves have a motivation. They're not just being mean for the sake of being mean. What they're doing, they think is right, essentially. And Kuvira is definitely that, because she believes wholeheartedly that what she's doing is trying to fix things and fix the Earth Kingdom and everything. But from the viewpoint of our protagonist, it's not very positive and tends to cause trouble. And I also thought it was interesting with her, where she's like a parallel of our main character in Korra, which is always really good. And it also makes it so that you as a viewer tend to have sympathy for them as well, because you would expect that you'd have sympathy for the protagonist. So then I think that was interesting. The only reason she's number 5 and not a little higher is I really think that she could have been an incredible villain if she just had a little bit more development. Mm-hmm. And we got, because in the finale, spoilers from a couple years ago, but Korra and Kuvira have a bit of a confrontation and they talk it out and it's great. I wanted more of that. I wanted more of understanding the workings of Kuvira's mind and her motivations, and just getting into her head a bit more and her headspace. But other than that, I think she had awesome potential and she fulfilled it, except for just a few little problems. But she was a really cool and awesome and powerful villain, so I was a fan of hers.
It's always nice to see a Kuvira fan, because I think she kind of got the short end of the stick, because she's right after Zahir, and then the end of her arc was also when we got the Korrasami confirmation, and so she's kind of stuck between two incredible highs of the show.
Exactly.
And I think she kind of gets discredited a bit because of that. John, are you much of a Kuvira fan?
Oh, Kuvira was amazing. And just that last season, I loved the political nature of her villainry, because you have this destroyed Earth Kingdom. She's trying to batch it back. She's trying to basically stitch it back together. It's coming from initially, at least, a place of good. I mean, the kingdom's destroyed. You got to get back together. But then she morphs into this Machiavellian, fascistic power ruler, and it just became such a great arc and really had a great season because of it. Also, this is gonna be a personal flaw of mine. She was kind of hot. Not gonna lie.
My personal flaw of Kuvira is she's played by Zelda Williams, and this was I think right around the time Robin Williams died, and so I was clinging to every remnant I could.
I know.
I was like, don't leave us.
Yeah, I know, right? I also loved how I love this in any show when this happens, but she popped up a couple times in book 3. Just in the background and everything, and I love when that happens, because then you see them later and it's like, oh, I recognize that person, but you didn't realize it at the time and everything. So.
I remember I was listening to the From the Spirit World coverage of the season 3 finale, and I'm pretty sure it was Dylan and Sam actually talking about, why did they name that random guard? Why did they mention... Right?
Yeah. She also showed up in the Metal Planet episode too. She was like a dancer with all of them.
Ooh.
Yeah, she's off in the background, kind of.
Did you have something, John?
No, I just said now you know why she's they named her.
So my number 5 is a bit older, and anyone who knows me knows I'm usually the one of the eccentric list of the group. And my number 5 is Maximilian J. Pegasus from the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Series. Pegasus was the only villain who was sympathetic. The rest of the villains we got in the series were all about, I've been raised in the ancient Egyptian society and I need to fix it, and the pharaoh is evil, and it was almost too much into the lore. Pegasus was this really great balance. As much as I love Merrick and Bakura, Pegasus was a normal guy who was in love with archaeology. He went to Egypt, he stumbled upon something, and he found the Millennium Eye, and he was promised he could use this to get back his wife, who he had loved and who had died of some disease we were never told about. And so, the fact that they built him up at first as this great villain. He's the creator of the card game. He's untouchable. He has a Millennium item. He's so incredibly powerful, and then after he's beaten, we find out why he is this way, and we get just such a sympathetic story for him. And then to see him lose his Millennium Eye and have it just plucked out of his head, and he keeps his hair over that the rest of the series, it's kind of tragic. And I think this show for an anime that was kind of aimed at kids, especially in the American dub, the fact that they gave him so much sympathy was really unusual for the time. I don't know if either of you have seen Yu-Gi-Oh! Have you?
Not much. No, I saw like smatterings of it when I was younger, so I don't remember much, unfortunately. But he sounds really cool.
John?
Oh, dear God, I've seen too much Yu-Gi-Oh! Over my life.
All right, any thoughts on Pegasus then?
I agree. I agree. I mean, I really liked Pegasus. Just again, same thing. Very sympathetic. You see that backstory. My only real criticism was that I don't know if this is just because when I jumped in the show, but that backstory didn't show up, I think, until later in Duelist Kingdom.
It was the end. It was after they beaten him.
Right. I mean, if it had been, if they may have put that a little bit in the beginning, I'm not sure how. It would have definitely filled in a little bit more. But from what I remember of him, he was one scary dude. I mean,
he was.
Yeah. I mean, just the voice as well. It was just this, hey, Kaiba boy. It's just this unsettling voice. I liked him.
I think what they wanted to do was build him up as the main antagonist, and then when they were done with him, then give him sympathy, because after that, in 2 through 5, they used him as kind of an ally. And so I think they wanted him to be this ultimate evil, and then when we moved past his scope to then say, no, not really. Because then we got into Merrick and all that jazz, but Pegasus was truly a believable villain, I think. So, moving right along, we're up to number 4. Back to you, John. What you got?
Okay, number 4, going to Gravity Falls, Bill Cipher.
Yes.
Again, Bill Cipher, Agent of Chaos, great Agent of Chaos. He's the villain that is in the background the whole time. He gets very little, like, airtime in the show. He definitely gets more as we go into season 2 and a little bit in season 1, but as he was it was the build-up, this, do not release at all costs. And when he finally was released, he brings the Nightmare Realm into the Earth, and we get these amazing visuals, these great monsters and these creatures he releases on society. You could really tell that not only is he an agent of chaos, but he's also organized, he's composed. He's a guy that knows what he's doing, he's got a plan all laid out. So it's even scarier because he's releasing all this anguish onto Gravity Falls, and he knows every step of the way what he's going to do, and we don't know that. So this whole time you're wondering, okay, how is he going to be beaten? How is he going to be beaten? And you just don't know. And when he finally is beaten, it's this huge affair. It takes every part working right. You have to lock him in Stan Pines has to lock him in his mind, and then he has to destroy him. And throughout the whole time, he's just turning guys into stone. He's releasing these creatures, these just hideous abominations. Again, another great character. Not a lot of motivation. We only know him as an agent of chaos, but he was a great agent of chaos. That's why I have him at number 4.
Awesome. Hayley, any thoughts? And then after your thoughts, you can just dive right in.
Sure. I have been meaning to watch Gravity Falls, but I haven't had a chance to, so I don't have much to add. I know, it's always there.
I think he looks cool. He's a little Illuminati eye triangle brought to life. I love it.
Oh, dangerous.
So what is your number 4, Hayley?
So my number 4 it's a bit of a rogue member of my list. But I was raised more on Studio Ghibli than Disney. But this is a Disney character. It's Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty.
Ooh.
Yeah, I've always loved her. That was the only Disney movie we had in my house was Sleeping Beauty for some reason. And Maleficent is like my favorite Disney character. And she's just, unlike all the other people on my list, she really doesn't have that many motivations and doesn't create a lot of sympathy. But she's just like evil, and she doesn't apologize for it. And I guess she does what all good villains do by being villainous, essentially. And she's just like, she's awesome, and she's powerful, and she's sassy and everything. So I really like her. She's got kind of like a special place in my heart growing up. But yeah, I really like Maleficent. She's awfully fun and just wickedly evil, essentially.
She is, to me, the quintessential Disney villain. Like, I'd argue more than, like, the Wicked Witch, or any of the, not the Wicked Witch, the the Snow White witch, whatever her name is, the
evil
queen, her.
Yeah, totally.
See, I couldn't even think of her name. Maleficent is
Yeah.
just the Disney villain.
Mm-hmm. And she kind of she has a character as well. Like, you know what she likes and her motivations, kind of. But yeah, she's great.
I'm realizing how weird my list is. My number 4 is Vlad Plasmius from Danny Phantom. He's the ultimate antithesis to Danny. They both went through the same situation. Danny's father caused an accident that caused both of these people to become half man, half ghost. And this is the two different ways you see it taken. You see Vlad become cynical and kind of this overlord, this opposite of Danny, who's this young teenage boy. He takes it in stride. He wants to do his part to help save the world. And so whenever we see them clash, it's so interesting because it's experience versus youth. It's cynicism versus optimism. It's these two completely parallel styles colliding. And so when we see them work together towards the end of the series, it's even more impactful. And I think of all the villains in Danny Phantom, and there are so many, Vlad to me is just the arch villain. He is Danny's nemesis. And the way they introduce him, all the way through him becoming mayor of Amity Park. Yeah, Amity Park. Mm-hmm. And just the way they treat him throughout the entire series, he's just such a great antagonist. And to me, the most iconic and most memorable of the series. You guys have any thoughts on Vlad Plasmius?
I'm trying to think back. I haven't watched the show in a while, but I remember really liking him and everything. And that whole, battle of the parallels and everything is always good to have.
John, do you have anything? If not, on to your number 3.
Oh, yeah, I liked Vlad Plasmius, and I think also because, I think what also is a point in his favor, he was kind of the least comedic of the villains in Danny Phantom. Because you had, what was it, the Box Ghost and the Lunch Lady.
Be with my power.
Yes. They were more sort of, they were more played for comedy. They were more like the funny villain. But Vlad was just this more serious guy. He, more serious, more powerful, and again, great voice actor. I forgot who it was, but I really liked him. Yeah, so that's a great choice.
And your number 3?
Okay, my number 3, and I apologize. I know you didn't want to have Avatar or Korra, but I had to put this guy number 3. Amon from the first season. Amon, yes, from the first season of Legend of Korra. And the reason I needed to have him in here because it was the first time I'd ever seen a Nickelodeon show, or really any kid show, have a villain that actually starts from a legitimate point of grievance with the society that he's in. Yeah. And what I mean, and because I was watching this, and again, this is me being a political science minor, so I was watching this for a very political lens, but I'm looking at Republic City, and I saw that the city council was all benders, there was no democracy, and I'm remembering going back to Last Airbender, and I'm thinking to myself, there's a ton of non-benders in this world. Do they have no political representation at all? And it's just weird that how you have this society where the benders are clearly the top tier and the non-benders are the lower tier. And from that came Amon, who has, again, a very innocuous sounding name for his group, the Equalists. You want equal rights? Great. But it's how he does it. He starts taking away their bending powers using a more advanced form of the chi blocking that we saw from Ty Lee in Last Airbender. I think it was Ty Lee. And you see how, and you see his support just grow and grow because he's offering this life of equal rights, but he's doing it in such a violent, dark way. And then the reaction to him is to keep to put curfews on the non-benders to limit their mobility, which then drives him even further because now they're going to him because they realize that their own government, which they never had any rights to begin with, is now treating them as the enemy. And from that, you see he takes away Korra's bending, with the exception of the air bending, which, again, really violent, really brutal way of doing it. He's taking away all these people bending. He's eventually defeated, and I guess his ship blows up in the water. But even through this villainry, he still brought about change. That they got rid of the council. There's now a democratically elected mayor. And even though he was a villain, it was a villain that came from a legitimate problem in society, and that's why I had to put him in at number 3, because I really think he was a villain that became a vehicle for a great political and social commentary, and Legend of Korra was one of the best shows for that kind of thing.
Amon is a great villain, and I love all the Avatar and Korra villains, and I just didn't want any because I didn't want to sit here playing bingo got that one.
Yeah.
And so, thank you guys so much for picking up the slack on the Avatar and Korra. Amon, another great villain. Almost put him on the list. Hayley, who do you have? Number 3.
My number 3 is Azula from the Avatar series.
You're seeing what I meant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which one do you have? Yeah. No, totally. But I love Azula, and I think everyone loves Azula in the whole series. She's definitely one of the most popular characters in general, is my impression of the fandom. But she's also great because even though in Avatar there is like the big villain with Fire Lord Ozai and everything, and you'd kind of expect that he would be more trouble to them than she is, she is definitely the true villain of the series. And you can see that in the end, where at the finale, when Aang is fighting Ozai, it's a big deal, but then there's also this really dramatic and beautifully composed fight between Katara Zuko and Azula, and just her like mental breakdown at the end of the season, or at the end of the series, added just a whole other layer of complexity to the character that we had kind of gotten hints of throughout the show. And it really ended her off, maybe not in a great place for her, personally, but I think it made her just kind of signified her place as a really great villain, and really cemented that she is the true villain of the series and is maniacal and everything, but she's got all these deeper inner workings and motivations happening at the same time. So Azula's pretty great.
Azula is fantastic. John, I'm sure you have a lot to say about Azula as well.
I am kicking myself for leaving her off my list.
For shame. I had an excuse. What's yours?
Yeah.
None. I totally forgot. I'm like, no, I was like, but yeah, Azula was such a fun character. Fun character. Again, same thing. You basically covered it all, Hayley. Great motivations. That build up. The build up, her powers. Really, for seasons 2 through 3, really strong character, really strong villain.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
She is amazing, a great voice actress in Great Griffin.
Oh, yeah.
So, my number 3 is the wonderful, from Total Drama, Alejandro. I am showing my geek colors once again, and the antagonists of Total Drama never get enough love, because they don't want to take over the world or enslave a race. All they want to do is win $1 million. But each season does have a main antagonist, and Alejandro is king of them all. He has he has caused the most eliminations in any one given season, and for good reason. He was introduced at the season 2 reunion special before they came into season 3. And he was basically brought in by the host, Chris, to stir up trouble and give a new challenge to the cast. He is maniacal, cunning, charming, speaks multiple languages, athletic, beautiful, just this all-around, evilly, devilishly brilliant character. And he is so well-crafted. He should have been just a one-dimensional villain, but he was the one-dimensional villain done right. He's never over the top. He's never cheesy. He's just the right amount of sinister to really add an element to the show. And then they gave him a romance with the show's original antagonist, Heather, which led to probably one of the best arcs in the series, leading up to the two of them in the finale. Spoilers for 2011, I think. But truly just a great character. When they brought him back in All-Stars, they didn't do it as well, but granted, All-Stars kind of ruined every character they brought back because it's a pretty bad season. But in World Tour, he was one of the best antagonists the show has ever seen. And I think he deserves to be the champion of the show as one of the good villains. And I'm assuming I'm again the only one who's seen Total Drama. So, John, number 2.
Number 2, from Adventure Time, The Lich.
Yes.
For much the same reason as Bill, he's the consummate agent of chaos in that show, but almost to a more evil extent, because he's the reason why that world is created. He set off the nuclear bomb that created everything. Again, going back to sort of the mechanics of the Lich, he's voiced by Ron Perlman, who brings that deep, sinister voice to the role. It's menacing, it's serious, it's grave, and of course the look, he's like half zombie, half bull with the horn or whatever that is. And so we have this great, so he's a great villain in that sense, but also you have and also we have to remember his big thing is the confrontation with Billy, and we see what happens. We don't see it on screen, but this is a character who actually rips off his skin and wears it.
Yeah.
I mean, for a kid show, that's pretty freaking dark.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it took me a while, but I was like, yep, that happened, and I can't believe the censors let that in. So, but again, he's this dark, menacing presence that's always looming. He's always there. I really think there's something going to be building up to him where he's going to become even more evil, just like how they did with Bill. The fact that he's like Tree Trunks' and Mr. Pig's son is odd. I'm like waiting for something really creepy to happen, and it pops up every now and then. So, again, one of those omnipresent villains. That's why I have him at number 2.
He is just a wonderful villain, and the way they introduced him was so great, because in season 1 we get this song about how great Billy is, and they mentioned he even fought the Lich, and we're like, okay, the Lich, cool, but it's not until like the season 2 finale where we really start to grasp who the Lich is, and then the snail is possessed by the Lich for like 2 or 3 seasons, and then we see him kill Billy, and just the constant one-upping almost of the Lich. And then I think Adventure Time may have lost its way a bit with villains after Orgalorp, but the Lich was just such a great, like you said, agent of chaos, and just a true symbol of, I think, how dark the show is willing to get. Hayley, what do you have to say about either the Lich and or your number 2 pick?
Yet again, another show that I keep meaning to watch. You gotta try and find time for it. But I will watch it, and I will love that character, I'm sure. So, to be honest, my number 2 and number 1 could very easily be interchangeable. But at this point, my number 2 is Lady Eboshi from the Princess Mononoke movie by Studio Ghibli. So she's number 2 because she's technically the main antagonist in that movie. But she's also very much a protagonist for a lot of the characters within the movie itself. So she's an antagonist, in case you haven't seen the movie, because she's trying to kill the forest god, which is not a good thing. I do not condone. But before the main character, Ashitaka, gets into the forest proper and discovers all about the god and everything else, he goes to her town, Irontown, where she's kind of like the mayor, essentially, and the leader of it. And you can see that she's really important to the people there. She's helping them and helping them survive in their lives. And she's really great as like a feminist icon and helping all the women in the town. But then she's also taking in all these people who are really sick and nursing them and employing them and everything. So she's a really complex villain, because at the end, you're like, oh, okay, well, I guess you're the villain, but at the same time, you're clearly doing all of these bad things with good intentions. And you think that you're right, and if you think about it the right way, yeah, she's kind of right in her motivations, because she's helping all the people that she loves and is surrounded by. But yeah, she's really interesting, because a lot of Studio Ghibli movies don't really have like an antagonist in the traditional sense, and I think she's kind of the closest, but even then, she's got so many layers of complexity to her that really make her a very interesting, sympathetic villain.
I personally have not seen the movie, but I've heard the character is wonderful, and I love villains that you can view either way.
Oh yeah, very easy with her. It's a great movie. It's a gorgeous movie too, especially when it was made. It's like, the animation's incredible.
Which, speaking of villains who can be taken as heroes or villains, my number 2 is the one and only Light Yagami from Death Note. He's, to me, the ultimate example of villain as protagonist. He is not a good person. Spoilers for Death Note, which ended in, I think, like 2007, 2009, something like that. But there is a new movie coming out, so spoilers for Death Note. He starts off just this normal high school student, bored of the world, gets a notebook that lets him kill anybody he wants, and he's like, I'm gonna kill criminals. I'm gonna, make the world a better place. And then he kind of takes that a bit farther. He's like, I'm gonna be a god. I'm gonna kill anyone who questions me. And he takes this from being almost like a hero and a vigilante to just almost a genocide of sin. And it's something that on one hand sounds good, but on the other hand, it's still just mass murder. And so by the end of the series, when Light does finally get his comeuppance, you don't know whether to cheer or be sad. On one hand, the protagonist of the show just died. On the other hand, one of the greatest killers to ever live is finally dead. And so the show really did a good job of balancing Light as hero and villain. But at the end of the day, it's almost impossible to look at this person and say, this is a good person. Do either of you have experience with Death Note?
No.
Sorry, no.
Ah! John, what is your number one then?
Okay, my number one, and this is a sentimental favorite, because he's the first villain I ever actually was rooting for. Invader Zim.
I would never even thought of him as a villain.
Yeah, that was the debate I was having, because is he a villain or is he an anti-hero? What is the difference between a villain and an anti-hero? Mm-hmm. But the idea is like he's trying to take over the world. And ideally, as a human, you're kind of biased against anybody who wants to take over the world, especially if they're from another planet. But that's just me. But here's the thing, it's like he's not supposed to succeed. You're not supposed to want him to succeed, but at the same time, you kind of do, because he's this great ball of manic energy. A great ball of manic energy. He's got a dim-witted sidekick in Gur. He's trying all... So he has this... and he's constantly trying all these new weird ways of doing it. He's trying... I mean, he kills Dib with a bunch of rubber pigs at one point. He has a house that walks around. He's tried invading Dib's brain. He's trying to do this all. So he's trying to prove to his Urkin overlords that he is worthy for it. And looking back on it, and I did some research on him beforehand. Apparently, there's a rumor that he wound up being the inspiration for Peridot on Steven Universe. So the fact that he's had that long of an influence in terms of like general villainry. Now, Peridot maybe can't be counted a villain anymore, but it's that sort of character. It's funny. You want him to succeed, even though you're not really supposed to. A great anti-hero, great villain, and sentimentally, one of my favorites. I have to go with Invader Zim.
And he's coming back. TV movie. Soonish.
You have no idea how excited I am for that.
I'm super excited and super scared because Hot Topic is going to become 2007 again, where you walk in and it's just Gur hoodies as far as the eye can see.
Oh, no.
And I'm not ready for that. But Zim is just an incredible character. That show got dark at times, but definitely a wonderful villain. Hayley, any thoughts on Zim, and then your number one?
No thoughts, unfortunately. My number one would be, it's kind of a collective, but it's the Red Lotus from Korra Book 3. All four of them. So I guess I may be cheating, but I think they operate as a villain together. So they are my favorite because they kind of combine all the things I love about villains into one group. The thing is, they have like this motivation driving them, and they totally believe it. It's kind of like a lifestyle in a way. So you can see why they're rationalizing what they're doing, even though it's hurting your favorite character, which is always quite sad. But you know where they're coming from. They're not just doing it for the sake of doing it. Also, what makes them great is because there's four of them, you can see all their different complexities and relationships with one another, and they're super powerful. And all the fight scenes in that season with them were just, like, incredible and some of my favorite ever. They're always in my top 5 best fight scenes, so that's always really good. And also what really kind of, I guess, tips them over the edge to the number 1 spot is that so often with villains, you kind of know in the back of your head, even though if you're like, oh no, you know the protagonist is going to be fine. Like, Superman isn't going to die. He's never going to die, because then what would happen to the movies and comics and everything else? So what makes the Red Lotus great is that they actually injure the main character in Korra, and they cause repercussions that lead into book 4. So their influence and their effect on the character doesn't just end in the season finale and we keep going on. They actually maintain a presence and kind of influence the forward movement of the show. So I really like them because they're more fleshed out than a lot of villains tend to be, I think, and really seem like an operating unit that actually has real repercussions on the characters and on the show in general.
And I think they did a great job of making each one feel important. A lot of time with villain groups, you know, it's like, we're the 10 great generals, 8 of us have no personality.
Exactly.
But,
yeah, like I know Ghazan, who's the earthbender in the crew, he was kind of like not a very important character for a bit, and then it's like, oh, Ghazan's awesome by the end and everything. They all have these great little moments and interactions with each other, and they actually get more than like one random line every so often. So yeah, I agree. That was really good.
Incredible group indeed. Finally, which I'm really glad, because I almost included Zahir on my list. I'm glad I swapped him out, because we did get to Zahir eventually included in the Red Lotus.
Exactly. But oh yeah, very important.
My number 1, which it's kind of sad this is going to be the last one, because I have a feeling neither of you have seen Code Lyoko. Am I correct in that assumption?
Correct, unfortunately.
I've seen a few episodes.
Okay, so John will be aware of what I'm talking about. My number 1 is Xana, which, to me, Xana is another one of those kind of Agent of Chaos characters, but we know why. Like, Xana is this program that was originally created to kind of protect Franz Hopper and Aelita, and basically there was like a bug in the system or something, and Xana just becomes this malware. And the basic premise of Code Lyoko, there's this virtual world, and these kids have access to go into it, actually virtually enter the world, and Xana, who is the malicious computer program, is able to escape the world using any electronics it wants, basically, and it has the ability to possess things in the real world. And it would be simple, turn off the computer, turn off Xana. However, Aelita, who's one of the main characters, her life is directly tied to the computer for most of the series. And so it's this interesting back and forth of, in order to keep their friend alive, they have to keep this great evil alive. And just the things Xana does, the program learns and gets smarter. It starts with very simple plots like, I'm going to possess a teddy bear. And by the end, it's hacking missile stations. It's trying to crash satellites. It's doing these things that would legitimately end the world. And still, it's up to this group of teenagers to stop it. And I thought the show did such a good job of making a symbol. Never even a character, no dialogue, no speaking at all except through what it possesses. Just a single symbol into this being of incredible evil. And I thought that took a lot of good writing and a lot of patience with letting the plot go a bit slower. Because you don't have time for big exposition. You have to kind of slowly build with that kind of a character. And I'll admit it's sentimental because I grew up on Code Lyoko. Code Lyoko was the show that inspired my love of science fiction. So Xana has always just been, to me, the greatest evil there is. So that is our top 5s. Let us know below your top 5s. We would love to know what you guys think. I will try to respond in the comments. And do you guys have any final thoughts on villainry?
No, I think this list just proves to me, though, that I am right in assuming that villains are the greatest characters ever. They are so cool. They have so many interesting motivations and everything, and they're awesome. And there's so many of them in so many different shows. Yeah, love them.
John, final thoughts?
I sort of love how diverse our list is, but also the fact that I don't think we had a single villain that could be classified as evil for the sake of evil. Like, which I think is really, really, it speaks a lot to the genre, because it's no longer just a case of, I am evil, I do evil things, ha ha ha. It's like, there's drive, reason, purpose, overall ideology, and that just what makes villains some of the coolest characters right now in animation.
Good final words. I agree. It's definitely, even characters that should have been, had Jasper existed in, say, the 80s, Jasper would have been evil for the sake of evil. But now we're getting stuff about, like, their ideology, how they think, how they've been raised to think. And I think it's just really, really interesting how far we've come, and I hope in 5 years we're able to do this again and have the list be completely different, because there's been so many new great villains. And I think we're heading in that direction. So, thank you so much to everyone for listening. You can support us on iTunes, leave us reviews. We love iTunes reviews. Support us financially at Patreon at patreon.com/overlyanimated. Thank you to all of our current patrons, especially our patron of the podcast, Ryan, aka Brian. And thanks, as always, to our Patreon executive producers, John, Ryan, Steve, and Alex. Check out all our upcoming roundtables and other discussions here at Overly Animated. And thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.